on land, labor, and food. We are joined here with a very special guest, Daniel, who's joining us from Sudan today. Is that right, Daniel?
I'm actually
Are you in Juba
Nairobi.
right now? In your, okay, you're in
Yes.
Nairobi. Okay, so you're joining us from Nairobi, and I think we're all right now joining from different parts of the world. So I'm Mihika. I am a lecturer in international development at the University of Bath, and I co-convene the working group with the fantastic Rama Salla Dieng, who is here as well, joining us. Rama, do you want to quickly say hello?
Just to thank Daniel again and to welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us.
Great. And if you're new to our working group, we are, as I said, we are the joint working group of two of the big development research institutes network in Europe and the UK. And as part of our working group, we conduct a series of webinars that is focused on the political economy and political ecology debates on land, labor, food, agrarian change in general. This is the penultimate webinar series for this semester, and the last one we have in May, and I will talk about it at the end of our session today. But without further ado, let me just introduce our speaker for today. Dr. Daniel Akech Thiong is a dual citizen of the United States and South Sudan, and their work bridges rigorous quantitative analysis and deeply rooted social political research. He currently serves as the senior analyst for South Sudan at the International Crisis Group, where he leads research on political security and economic developments to support conflict.
You're breaking, Mihika.
Efforts.
Is it only me?
Can you hear me? Daniel can hear me? Okay.
We lost you for a minute. Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. So as I was saying, Daniel leads research on political security and economic development to support conflict prevention efforts by regional bodies and donor governments. A native Dinka speaker, Dr. Thiong has dedicated his career to understanding and stabilizing the Horn of Africa. He previously served as the founding CEO of Sudd Conservancy, directing community-led conservation and climate-resilient initiatives. His extensive policy background also includes roles as a policy advisor for the Wildlife Conservation Society in South Sudan. Remarkably, and this I find very interesting, Dr. Thiong brings a highly technical lens to his geopolitical work. He holds a PhD in mathematics from Claremont Graduate University, with academic publications focusing on operation theory, and Banach spaces. He's the author of The Politics of Fear in South Sudan, Generating Chaos, Creating Conflict, and Climate Shocks and Pastoralist Migration in South Sudan, which he will speak to us about today. So I think it's really interesting that Daniel brings this interdisciplinary lens, which is truly interdisciplinary in nature, and it's exciting to hear Daniel talk about climate shocks and pastoralism coming from the long history of very technical understanding that he has in mathematics. So the floor is yours now, Dr. Thiong. Thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you so much. That was a wonderful, amazing. I'm humble, Mihika, and Rama also for organizing this. And I also welcome the audience here. Well, the book that I will talk about, the climate shocks and pastoralist migrations in South Sudan. I want to say a few words as to why I even wrote the book. It was 2010. It was the media. I don't want to name the media outlet. A major media outlet put out a survey on climate change awareness in Sudan. At that time, there was no South Sudan; it was together. But I could tell when they were interviewing people, the conclusion was that people in town, in urban centers, knew what climate. They were aware of climate change, and the people in the villages had no idea. So that actually infuriated me because I knew that there was so rich literature that about climate change, oral literature, that was not accessible to this media outlet. So they published their documents. And then I also read on the literature in South Sudan. There were two major scholars. One scholar wrote about a trip that was taken by a British government to jeopardy in 1911, and they recorded a drought. That rain did not actually come until August, which would be very strange because the raining season starts in April. So I went to the oral archives and also discovered that this was also recorded by the songs. But the key observations was made as sort of like a way to criticize the societies that were rapidly attacked by raiders. And they could not defend themselves because their houses were scattered. So these scholars had no idea that these scattered houses, that pattern of settlements, was actually a very strong vision on how to address climate shocks. And at that time, it was actually a consequence of climate shocks, the disease, the epidemics. In 1953, this is the last example I want to give, was a great scholar working with the Egyptian government as a consultant. It was someone called Dr. Paul Peter Owl. He wrote volumes and volumes on the Sudd, which I will talk about. And he mentioned that epidemics were rarely occurring. He did not know that this was actually not an accident. It was a design by those villages that the way they settled their homes was basically something in 2020 became popularly known as social distancing. In the Western thinking, this was putting a distance between individuals. In the societies that don't think in those terms, it was actually necessary to put a distance between homesteads, households. So, but it was the same idea. So it saved people, but of course, the threats keep changing. Now let's go back to the book. The title of the books talk about climate shocks, and then also pastoralist migrations. So what is the climate shocks? Broadly speaking, I think of it as a flooding or drought. But then there are also, these are the primary key terms that refer to climate shocks in the books. But also there are secondary classifications. Am I still connected?
Yes, you are.
I just saw something popping up, but yeah. So now there are actually secondary levels of climate shocks. These are, you could think of them as consequences of these two primary terms on climate shocks. The diseases, the famine, and the insecurity. How are they generated? One of them is very obvious to see how famine could actually arise. If you lose your homes, you cannot cultivate, harvest will fail, and then you have a famine. And then also you have disease outbreaks. If you look at the oral accounts mentioned in the books, every 10 years there was a pattern where either a drought would be preceded by a disease outbreak, or those three were like sort of like interlacing. So one was coming after the other. The disease outbreak, flooding, droughts. So people would think, maybe they could be wrong, but they thought that it was the climate shocks that brought diseases. That's how they think of it. And then also, and maybe they're not entirely wrong, the same with the famine. Now, the third one is the displacements. So the displacement actually could be caused by the flooding as a response. People would try to put together their hands around putting a dikes to fight the water. And then when it keeps rising, then they can no longer do it. The next thing they do is fly, is run. They run to other areas. That's also displacement. The diseases also were actually the major cause of displacement, and then the famine as well. So, and when people actually were running away, you encounter lots of issues. One is actually you could try to recreate the life you had, and then there will be problems. One of them is if you are a pastoralist, you're moving to farmers area and you want to recreate this pastoralism, it might not actually work. It's incompatible. But then you could also move to the same area that would accommodate you, but then the spaces that your livestock will need and your soil would be shrinking. So you could see a conflict there. And then now the insecurity, which is the dominant narrative on South Sudan as we speak, the political violence, the communal violence and stuff. This was actually a subset. It's usually seen as a consequence of climate change. It's not really the driving force, but it's part of the ecological forces shaping the area. So the history of the Sudd, which I had to reconstruct using these oral accounts, was that it was just a history of rhythmic patterns, oscillations of these climate shocks events interlacing each other. And then the people had to come up with smart ways to survive. So first, when they move into the Sudd, the local accounts through songs mention that the reason they moved to the Sudd was actually the lowest place in the area in terms of landscapes. So it was wet, but then there was major droughts that drove people all the way to Tanzania, to Uganda, to Kenya, and then South Sudan. So the groups that settled there, they needed tools to actually move. The tools they needed were drought-resistant crops, which actually did very well. And then they also needed cows. This is like zebu-likes, cows with humps on the back. And these cows actually could move long distances. Without those cows, it was not possible for them to move. And then once they moved to those areas, this was the establishment of what I call the cow economy. And this is more like mobile banking, where they move with these cows. They actually do a lot of transactions with them. They settle marriages, and cows became more important than just like supporting lives. It was more of a social value for them. The songs, everything, the poetry was created around cows. And it makes them actually conquer the space. What had changed is that as much as the drought was actually coming less frequent than the flooding, the cow economy was sustainable. In other communities, they had been forced to give it up. But in this particular place, it could be the last place for this cattle keeping economy to die. And in recent years, what had been happening, the oscillation of the water, where the water recedes when it is dry and then it expands. This is what we're talking about, is a place they call Wide Nile. And this area had been, the bank of the Niles are so beaten that the water actually expands out and it occupies a place, a wetland. It's called the Sudd wetland. And this is Arabic word for a blockade. And what happens there is that there is a flooding vegetation there that blocks the boats. And so that's why they call it the Sudd. So it became a nightmare for people wanting to actually see the source of the Nile, which started in 1840s, 1839. When people wanted to move, they could not actually easily move. And that the 1 million people live in that area. The number could be even higher now. These people are now threatened by the fact that during normal seasons, the Sudd, this swamp wetlands, is one of the best rich diversity in the country, in the regions. Once it shrinks, the original size could be measured. It used to be 8,000 kilometers squares area. And then in 1960s, something magical happens. It quadrupled its size to about 32,000. And then since then, it never actually went back fully. It can only escalate. And so what had happened are three things: that the intensity of the expansions is so high, and the frequency, which gives people no room to try to, even if they return home, they cannot rebuild the same life. They cannot rebuild the same economy. So this is actually making people in the villages realizing that, look, we have not been to this cattle camp, which they marked through a song for the last 112 years. That means that place is gone. So not only are they losing the economy, they're also losing these lands altogether. And then the areas that they are actually pushed to, the choices are very limited. One of them is that they could become fishermen, because you cannot do in this in this swamp area, there are no grazing areas when the whole thing swell. So they had to become fishermen. And the fishing islands actually supports a very small populations. So once you increase that populations, the first major loss is the strategy of social distancing, these separation settlements, which protects you from diseases. You go to these fishing islands, the dry areas, which I call green spaces, are shrinking. They are so narrow that in 1999, I was in one of the islands called Jonglei village. The size was 30 households. So one day there was a disease outbreak. It kills a child almost in every single household, almost 30 kids from different houses. I survived with some of my friends. So because the way people were living is no longer, they can no longer sustain that. They cannot keep social distancing because of these spaces. That actually exposed them to a problem that they had solved for many years, for hundreds of years, this issue of dealing with epidemics. So they can no longer address that problem when they are there. And then also the fishing, the locals there want to sustain because they have lived there for some time, very small populations. When you increase the population with cattle keepers, sometimes they could be more arrogant because they were actually enjoying the bigger space. They don't care about which hooks you should use, which net you should use. And then that creates a problem. And this is one of the things we've been seeing in the media. People are killed here and there over these islands. So that is also kind of limiting the population. The rest of the people would have to move to other areas. They could go to urban areas, but the urban centers have also limitations. You need some education. You need to be able to speak the national languages, which are determined by political leaders, English, Arabic, and all these languages. These people don't have time for that. They are already grown up. They think that they know how to survive, but in town they cannot. So here is a problem. You could manufacture a crisis by having this big population moving to urban areas. They could also move to other areas that are higher grounds. For example, in equatorial regions, which has 3 states, these people would move there. But then the challenge is that once they move to this area, they will look at the grass is green. They will think that they want to recreate the mode of living, the cow economy, and that will become incompatible with the farmers farming there. And that also has led to some of the problem. Amidst all this, when the pattern was not this fluctuating in the past, how did people actually recreate life when they actually return home? They used to actually, and this is leading me to talk about hidden history of corporations. So once people actually move back after a flooding episodes, they have lost the cows, the land is there, but they need to restock because this is how the cow economy cannot work without cows. They need to restock. And when they are doing that, they have to rely on distant neighbors, people who speak completely different languages, who might have been lucky not to have been affected by these particular climate shocks. And what they did was they take girls and give them to young men from that community in exchange for cows. And this is not one-sided. It goes both ways. Now these girls, the women, always in the narratives that I have been hearing in the Sudd, were always the one saving people. Whether it's a gigantic animals attacking a community, there are myths like that. It's always a woman actually standing up to sacrifice. So this has become part of their narrative that women were actually taken there, and they recorded this. One singer on YouTube recorded his great aunt getting married to Akobo. This guy is from another county next to the White Nile, from Dinka County. His aunt was married to some guy, and the cows that were brought, he counted them, about 17 cows. And these cows actually recreated his entire section, his entire extended family was created because of this wealth. But then it's not one way, because the people in Akobo in 1959 faced a drought, a massive drought, which killed so many giraffes, and people start calling it giraffe drought. This one forced people to come nearer to the Nile, and then from there, they were accommodated. Their cows actually outran them. They arrived 3 days later, the people. Cows came first. the locals actually took the cows. But when these people came, presented themselves, and they said, these are our cows, we were running from a drought, there was a negotiations, and the leaders gave the cows back and asked the people to stay until raining seasons. This was 1959. So either droughts would chase one community to the other, and then they would be accommodating them. The only challenge is the long-term stay. If it is something, the land is taken forever, people are not returning, then of course, people will become impatient, as we would normally do. If you have a visitor for one day, many people would accommodate that. But if it is months, it becomes a problem. But it needs to be managed. So that relationship is no longer there. Why? Because in 2019 to 2020, East County is the lowest county on the bank of the Nile in Jonglei, was hit by flooding. 70% of the population left. And then in Lawnware area in Akobo is another ethnic group. They were hit by drought. They are closer to Ethiopia. So where did they choose to go? To the same place that was vacated by the people who ran from the flooding. So you see the confusion, that the same climate shocks together is hitting everywhere. So there is no safe place to go. This is the new dimensions of what we are seeing. The population relating to the security, the insecurity, and the politics, the population that had been displaced become vulnerable, especially the youth, to exploitation by politicians. Sometimes I would always tell people that you could never have a war reaching a massive scale unless there is a climate shocks to push it there. And this had been almost the history of South Sudan, that in the 1960s, people were displaced, and then the rebels, leaders, had already mobilized youth to send to war. And then the same in recent years. So it has always been like that. So there are instances of corporations. Of course, there is violence, but there is also issues that when we discuss that violence, part of the mistakes that people make is actually resorting to simplistic narratives, such as the hatreds among groups, which had not been there, but it could be something that the politicians also exploit, especially among the vulnerable people that had already been pushed there. So it's the ecological forces that are actually pushing this. They are the main drivers of what we are now calling intercommunal violence. Also, the issue of identity is actually shaped, is one of the things, not only the economy shaped by the climate shocks, but your identity, social identity, is actually is created and destroyed by climate shocks. When you are pushed by a disease outbreak from a village to run for your life to another, the people who welcome you are taking a great risk. And then once you are actually part of them, you choose to be identified with those people. I look at the villages along the Nile in the Sudd, and one village had four different tribes living under different years, 100 years, 200 years difference, where you would see a completely new group in that area. So once you choose a locations, the identity of people staying there depends on which time scale you are actually talking about. So that means the idea of identity, it's not really fixed, it's fluid. It's something, and it has a lot to do with ecology. It's ecological forces that are actually shaping this. So for people to reduce this as if it's a rigid thing, is part of the war, yes, but it's a symptom of something much bigger that people are actually not looking at. Lastly, I move to the issue of solutions, because there has to be something that needs to be done. How do people survive? They are actually made vulnerable because they can no longer use those patterns. Creating homes, distances between homes is no longer sufficient. Moving to other people areas and try to recreate the life is not possible. Returning home to recreate life, how long do you wait to do that? Because some people have been waiting 6 years now, and it's now recurring again. So it could be longer. You will never really have a life if you have to wait to return home when that home is actually gone. Climate shock is actually not destroying lives. It's also reclaiming lands and keeping it. So the government should actually engage with the communities to look for ways to mitigate climate shocks. I put this in chapter 11 of the book, Mitigating Strategies. And one of them is actually not only...
Sorry, Daniel,
Yeah.
we lost you. Sorry.
Okay.
Please repeat that last sentence. Yes, sorry.
Yeah. So I was saying the government needs to talk with the people to try to look for ways to mitigate. So
I think we lost him.
We lost Daniel, yes.
Okay, he might be joining again soon. Let's keep an eye on the chat box, on the participant list.
I mean, in the meantime, is there anyone who wants to introduce themselves and tell us perhaps how you might be interested in the talk? Because I do see we see some new names.
Yes.
So yeah, feel free to put it in the chat if you prefer. You don't have to unmute yourself, but would be very curious to learn about which aspect of this, of Daniel's talk is of interest to you.
Well, I will start. I'm not working on Sudan, but I'm really interested in he's trying to go beyond, simplistic narratives, not just violence, because that's what we hear often when we talk about Sudan, South Sudan, violence or different political divisions, but trying to factor in the ecological dimensions. And I think that's really rich because that's a bit rare when we, for instance, if I take the Sahel region comparatively, we find the same trope that is dominant, trying to explain everything by politics or by violence and not trying to look at the ecology. And I think that's something really rich that he provides.
Yeah, good afternoon, colleagues. I think I could also jump in while we have time. My name is Nicholas Wilson. I'm a technical advisor with Otherwise Research in South Sudan, and I've been working on a long engagement with the Ministry of Education to expand access to education to marginalized communities. So last year, we were doing actually the pastoralist education program, which is an alternative education system with mobile schools aimed at pastoralists. And this year, we're undertaking research into education for communities affected by floods. So very fortuitous book Dr. Akech has written because it touches on exactly both of these themes. So thank you for hosting today.
Thank you so much for joining us and for sharing this. I think he would be delighted to hear it from you once he rejoins.
Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah, thank you so much. Sorry, Mihika is the chair. I'm not sure why I'm talking. Let me...
That's absolutely fine. I mean, this is, since you all are new to the group, this is a pretty informal group, and we usually have a larger group of attendees, but the format is fairly informal in the sense that you can unmute yourself and chat. So absolutely fine, Rama, no problem at all. And thanks, Nicholas, for joining. We have a message from Kavya in the group chat, and I will just read that out. Kavya says hello, and Kavya is not directly involved in development studies, but researches informal work in India, mostly from a labor geography lens, but broadly interested in the field of climate impacts on workers. Thanks, Kavya. That's very interesting, and perhaps you've joined us for the other webinars as well, but we do have a lot of focus on labor, and the last two talks were focused primarily on social reproduction and gendered lenses on labor. So yeah, so do follow our work and follow our group by joining our mailing list if you're not already on it. And I will put in the instructions to join the mailing list in the group chat in a bit. Just join back. Welcome back, Daniel. I believe you had a bit of a technical issue, but glad that you could join back.
Having me back. Yeah.
Yeah, no problem. So yeah, so just to let you know that, we have Arub Al-Faki here. Can you hear me?
Nice. Yes, I can hear you.
Yes, we have Arub Al, who is a PhD student also from Sudan and works on the food politics and the political economy of famine there. And we also have Nicholas Wilson, who also works in the region and on education. So we were just having a conversation about and learning from their insights about Sudan and their interest. And of course, we're also joined by others who will have questions for you. So perhaps what I can do is, do you have any final thoughts to wrap up your talk? And if you could just give us perhaps
Yes.
a couple of points, wrap up in 2 or 3 minutes, and then we'll open it up for discussions.
Yeah, definitely. I was going to do that. Thanks, Mihika. And sorry, everyone, for the glitch here. Beside the climate shocks that we have discussed, the impacts, there is also an exacerbating factor that not only is the water washing things away, the water is covering something beneath the earth, the oil. So these extractive entities are also exacerbating the problems because the economy that should be broad enough to accommodate the communities should be nature-based. There are opportunities for nature-based solutions to help the communities cope with these problems. And some of the things that I have put into the books were community-led, not community-based, community-led initiatives around conservations, not just for the wildlife, but also for these species that are affected, that they could actually turn these solutions to support local initiatives. When it is bigger, massive extractive industries that are taking over in these wetlands, which is now they're discovering a lot of oil in these areas, this is already a problem that you could face. Pollutions, the biodiversity being washed away. So at this point, I will stop. That it's the climate wars are sometimes not necessarily always the whole story. There are collaborations among these communities, and they have been open to work together. So if people could help them to come up with nature-based solutions and steer them away from extractive industries, we could be able to look at a solution that could actually help people and change lives. So I'll stop at this point, and I will take any questions that you might have. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I think with that, we'll just open the floor for, discussions. I know that there are certainly certain questions that some have. So please unmute yourself and raise your hand, and I will sequence your questions. It would be good if you spoke it out, but equally you're welcome to write it in the chat, and I'll read it out. Nicholas, please go ahead.
Thank you. And thank you for a great talk, Dr. Akech. I actually have two questions. I think I'm going to ask one now because I'm sure someone else will have a question too. But my first question actually is about your framing of the talk today. I'm very interested that your primary focus or your analytical lens was on historical events, right? We're talking early 20th century events in Jonglei, much of your talk, right? And it's fascinating because actually a lot of the time in South Sudan now, people are talking about what happens in recent years. And this idea that, for example, the Boer community is coming further down to the south or even to Western Equatoria. People, if you read the news, is framed as something which has only just started or has only been happening for the last 5 years. Did you intentionally adopt this quite far back historical focus? And maybe how would you bridge your historical analysis to what's happening today and the kind of narratives around this stuff today?
Mihika, do I take them as they come or you wait?
No, yes, please go ahead. Go ahead. And
yeah. Nicholas, this is a really great question. The thing is that the scales in which you could realize that you have a problem when it comes to climate, ecological forces affecting lives. It has to be very long. It's not a daily count. It's not a weekly count. It's not even a yearly count. So this is from the observations that I've seen when I was actually part of the uniqueness in this book is that I actually live in the Sudd for a duration of almost 7 years. I was lucky. I was born in Khartoum, brought to the village. I only spoke Arabic at the time, so I learned everything I learned in the Sudd. So there were, this was sort of like live experience, that the changes would be noticed 50 years, 100 years, based on my talks with people before I even thought about writing the book. So I came up with this idea of historical framing as the only way to make sure that we don't actually run away with symptoms, but look at like a pattern. So I was not successful in going back 500 years, but I would have actually pushed that there because it's the best way to actually talk about climate change, climate shocks. It actually happens in the scales. The time scale is actually 100 of years or 50 years at least. It cannot be just like weeks and months like I do now for a living where I work. We look at things on a daily basis. So that scales actually misses the point. Also, the corporations we are talking about was wiped away by the emergence of political conflicts, because those were not part of the conflicts in the past. It was scarcity. I'm not denying that it drives conflicts, but it's not the whole story. It could also drive corporations, like I was just narrating. So that history, people moving to Equatoria, it started to happen in 1920s, in 1919. So, but prior to that, the kind of movement was completely different. So that's why I had to like push back so that at least we see a much longer horizon. Of course, what is happening now is still much of it is politicized. There was a book written by someone from Equatoria narrating corporations in the 60s that were actually supported by the government at that time. This time around, the governments tend to exacerbate rather than actually solve the problem. Politicians look at how do they gain, and that's really how the narrative is framed today. And I didn't want to actually focus on that polarized discourse, rather look at this in a more scientific way with longer durations. Yeah, thanks.
Aru, please go ahead.
Thank you, Dr. Daniel. This is very interesting. I'm from Sudan and I can relate to many of the arguments you brought in, particularly on how these ecological pressures are it's not a violent climate. This is creating a climate of violence in itself. This is how you should read political conflicts. But I am curious to know more how do you look at international interventions when it comes to climate change mitigation in South Sudan, and do you assess this as successful? Did it work? It didn't work? Do they capture the nuances related to these pressures on the ground and how it goes forward, and also how you see that in terms of the amount of interventions again brought to South Sudan after the independence, because there have been a lot of support on that sense. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Aruf. Yeah, I'm happy that you like the framing that I did there, because it's when we look at the long scale, Sudan and South Sudan are one in my reading, and also the international intervention. We have to go back to the entire international development in Sudan, and then South Sudan was part of that, the Southern Sudan regions. The development had always been on emergency basis. So that means the analysis that inform this kind of interventions are also on emergency basis. That emergency food, accommodating people who are displaced temporarily, no long-term plans, because there's no money for long-term plans. So development in South Sudan has always been just something we have to do now, and then as it comes, we get to pull resources together to address the emergency. The root causes of emergency, why are people actually moving? And then becomes an issue. One of the things, for example, when people are displaced, where do they run to? They run to these places that are high grounds. the NGOs that are helping with humanitarian reliefs, they go to the places where these people are, but rarely go to the places where these people are coming from. So that means they're just looking at the end tail, the hit of the problem, but the tail of the problem, the roots of the problems, nobody's actually willing to go there because it's deeper. It's something that will require a more sustainable long-term investment to address the crises that are actually taking people away. So it's international intervention in general it's just about emergencies, and by doing this, they are just treating the symptoms. What the water actually takes to the end is just like floating vegetations, is all these issues that are actually grabbed along the way. But actually, the root cause of this problem cannot be addressed under the current setting, that the emergencies are the primary mode of operations for international interventions in Sudan, as well as now in South Sudan. That is always temporary. So there is no looking at that. But if they wanted to actually change this, it's possible that the solutions I was saying, that even the people working in the climate space, you could see climate bandits emerging, where you have green grabbers, people who want to actually grab opportunities and then they run with them. So there is no democratic, decentralized way of actually making the locals participate in the process of helping them. So that's why I always advocate communities should lead, not to be handed something. Because sometimes this design of international intervention is everything is designed at the top, and then it is being forced down, and that doesn't work. If they start at the bottom, they might actually be able to get to the roots of, and then even if it's very limited, it could go a long way if it is actually properly directed. Thank you.
Other questions or thoughts? Nicholas, you did say that you had another question, so do you want to go ahead and ask it?
Yeah, I can do. So I want to interrogate one thing you mentioned, Daniel, which is that climate shocks kind of cause displaced populations, and then the youth become easy to mobilize for conflicts, right? I think part of what I'm looking at in South Sudan, and you missed this, but I've been on a research engagement with the Ministry of Education, looking at the pastoralist education program. And I think one of the ways, which has always been talked about, with increasing the resilience of these pastoralist youth to being mobilized for armed conflict would be education. But now trying to get pastoralist education right is hard enough in itself. And pastoralist education, when they're affected by floods as well, becomes an even more tricky issue, right? So I don't know, maybe applying your historical lens or generally, how do you see education in the context of pastoralist displacement due to climate shocks?
Well,
sorry to interrupt you, Daniel. I think Rama had her Rama's. Did you have your hand up as well, Rama?
Yes. I just wanted, if I can add it to the
yes, go ahead.
This round of question. I just wanted to ask if you think, Daniel, that your ecological approach could be also generalized to other, let's say, zones. I don't want to say conflict zone, but other geographical areas such as the Sahel. Or is it really context specific? And the second question was more about the methodology. And I think it relates to the question that was previously asked. How did you validate your historical accounts when reconstructing long-term climate patterns? I'm really curious because I would like to use the same.
Can I answer now?
Yes, please. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. So first is the Nicholas questions. One of the critics we have about, especially myself, about building things is that in places like South Sudan, and it's true everywhere that I have been to, infrastructure, when you talk of infrastructure, what comes to people's minds is just physical buildings, the roads, the good schools and stuff. But one other part of infrastructure that people don't talk about is human infrastructure. it does not need, education does not need you to have a fancy coffee shop where you drink coffee while you are thinking. It doesn't have to be happening in a beautiful building. So if that change is actually put in place, that you could deliver education, you could educate someone in an island, give them proper education there while they are moving. And it's something that is possible, that could be explored. Mobile clinics are built in some places to help people. There is no reason why we cannot have mobile educations. So you could actually invest in the current technology could be harnessed to actually set up even computers that utilize satellite internet to get education to places that you don't need to invest so much money in this. I came up with this idea in 2007. I call it walking buildings. And this is buildings that work. So it's just like put your money on a human beings, find ways to make it work without really throwing away so much into infrastructure, because this will be washed away by floodings, like they were done in recent years, or by conflicts, for example. So that is something that the international development could explore, that how do you, maybe you could deliver things in a mobile manner, using AI, using technology to incorporate delivering quality education, not necessarily in a fancy building. So that's how I would actually explore that. It's still new, no one is doing it yet, but it's something that I wanted to throw there as an answer to your questions. Rama had two questions. One I remember better because I would talk about it at length, is the one about the methodology, but there was a first one also. Mihika, can you mention that, or?
Rama, did you want to? Yeah.
Yes, it was just about how.
Oh yeah, I got it now. Yeah.
Do you think whether you think that it could be generalized to the Sahel or not?
Yeah, good. Yes, I agree with the people who think that research is not scientific if it cannot be replicated. So this is actually just observing and using oral traditions that are available, and these are available everywhere. Part of the problem in communications is that one society would think that their way of looking at things is more superior than the other, whereas the response from the other communities that might not necessarily dominate the research would be, well, you don't understand us. We understand one another better. And so there has to be a way. I actually mentioned when I talk about literature review, at that time when my book was reviewed, there was a third reviewer who got mad at me for one reason, and it was a good reason, that I did all this beautiful work, and then at the end, I was still using this literature from the Durham archives that I was severely criticizing, and he was mad, like, delete them. And I actually deleted them. So, but it was not really bad. It was good. It was just checking. But the reason I refused not to delete all of them is because I wanted to use that literature to validate what I could validate. So if you look at the time scale when the written documents were actually mapped out in the regions, it's almost 100 years or more. That was a good scale for me to verify some of the things. The others, there was not much I could do. So I would limit myself to just like historical accounts of how villages were vacated, how groups of people moved. I could trace the names. People in one village in Murle, I was there in Pibor at once, and my guide there was telling me I was trying to learn a few things about their language, and I asked him what is an elephant called. He mentioned it, angol, and then I asked what is a home, and he said like korok. Then I thought, and then there was some Dinka guy I knew from a very far distance village who was called angol korok, the combination of home of elephant in a totally different language. So you could see how these interactions could also be used to actually trace to verify these accounts about people being in one place at some point, or maybe closely interacting with one another. That part I could not verify much, but what I could verify was this 100 years. For example, in 1911, I mentioned a drought lasting until August. So that means that whole year there was no rain at all. So I went to the villages, asked people what happened around this time. The thing with the locals, they don't have time scales where they mention 1911, but they could actually look at the year if there was a disaster. And this actually tells you that climate shock is actually a bigger part of mathematics in the villages. That if there was a disaster, they name it something. They call it giraffe drought, which people would actually try to compare notes on it, the written notes, and then it would be 1959. And then they would say like red water flood. This was 1916. They could say another flood of Magog or something. A guy called Magog died in that, and this was 1876. So you could actually look at the time scales. I also used the proximity, the neighborhoods. In Ethiopia, there were stories written by explorers. The only problem with explorers that they will write something that they have seen, and then lots of not very careful language about the people they're describing. So that was my biggest problem with them. They're very careless because they were not well trained. They were just inexperienced 20-year-old people moving around. But some of the things they wrote down, events happened. There was a smallpox that actually broke out in Asmara area, and the one guy was running around trying to escape. And every village he went to, he would find the same disease already spread there, and then he had to return home. And so that is how I look at it. But now what I'm formalizing is the songs, so that you could actually record the songs. And some of the songs, strangely, there were anthropologists writing. It was called The Man or something. It was a magazine or a newspaper, journals that was published in anthropology in earlier 1900. And one person wrote about the Dinka songs, basically saying that it's they up and invoked. It's more like episodic, that it's about just like now and then it's done. He would be shocked. There was a song that is still the national anthem of some group that I have seen them singing that songs louder, and it's the most popular ones. If you don't sing it, you are not actually dancing well. And this song was composed 300 or 250 years ago. The composer is known, and then I trace from that person to the current generation. There is a mathematics about this age set. It's actually, there is a spacing. There is initiation that happens every 3 years. So you could do a very complicated math, and then you will figure out exactly an estimate of a time when this person composed these songs, because the locals had known the name attached to these songs, and still very popular songs. So that actually tells you even how long those people actually had stayed there. So this complicated mathematics could be formalized to answer the question of whether we should discard this as useless, or whether it should be part of the knowledge, and who decides what should constitute knowledge anyway. So yeah.
Thanks so much, Daniel. I'm just stunned that as someone who comes from the episteme of mathematics, you have been able to, take into account these complex, messy realities that comes from very different epistemic worlds and bring it together so thoughtfully. Just for closing thoughts, I think I will just ask you the last question and then ask which could be a final word, which is that how did mathematics help you think about some of these issues? Where did that come in, if at all? You're muted, yeah.
Mihika, this is a really great question. One of the things that I have realized is that mathematics is basically about recognizing patterns, whether it's a data set. And now with the AI actually coming into the picture, data is no longer just about numbers. It could just be about events that you record over the years. It could be a list of songs that you get the elders to sit down to record them, write them into words, and then search for the mentions of these places and that. So this recognition of patterns is everywhere. It's just that the language in which it is communicated, it's so specialized that it can be intimidating. One of the things that math people tends to not actually do much like others is they are afraid of actually using numbers. We don't normally just like apply beautiful graphs when we don't think that actually there's reality in it. So, and that's one of the things I had to be careful about the data that had already been cleaned up, watched, and put there to be used. I will be very careful not to rush there because there are lots of things that actually qualitative data, which you can easily, you could crunch it. You could crunch it into using AI tools now into quantitative data. And that is actually much better to do something closer to the people. If it is people's knowledge, it should actually involve their inputs. Part of the problems that we have seen in the past with the great anthropologists and also people I mentioned who had studied the Sudd flow of water and designs of ecological, hydrological issues there were actually mathematicians. They were quants. And they made terrible mistakes, including these anthropologists actually observed people. And then they kept changing their ideas. One great anthropologist, I don't want to mention him because he might have some students here or people who like him. I have no problem with him. That he had to change his answer. He would describe the society this year, and then this was in the 1940s in Zande, in South Sudan. The South Sudanese people are some of the best studied in anthropology, and the great anthropologists kept changing their answers. One guy changed his answer 3 times. The reason was because the data was limited. It was just refined and nice data that sits in the library. But if they were actually allowing the consumption of the data, and then the data determines what the pattern should be. And I think that's where mathematics is very useful in seeing the patterns, reading the informations differently from the others. I don't have the limitations of being constrained by the rules in social science. So I don't know anything about great writers. I have never taken a class in political science my entire life. So when I come in, I'm just like a total innocent person. And that actually is, there are times when innocence might be useful. So.
Okay, so I think what I'm hearing is that then Rama and I have no business in teaching research methods to our, at our institutions, at our universities. So that's the message that I'm getting. But thank you so much, Daniel, for this talk and for this discussion. I'm not seeing any hands or any comments. So I think with that, I think we'll draw this webinar to a close. And thank you for participating. And another final round of applause for Daniel. Thank you so much for joining us. Oh, sorry, Rama, you had something to say? Please.
Sorry, I just left a comment. I wanted to thank Daniel again and everyone who's joined us. I also wanted to pay a tribute to someone from our community, Hamid Khalafala, who's a Sudanese doctoral researcher in Manchester, has passed away. And he went missing the past few days, and he was declared, dead. So just wanted to present my condolences to all of you.
Thank you so much, Rama, for that. Okay, with that, I think I wish you all a good 1st of May Day holiday tomorrow, and hope to see you all again at our next webinar, which is, and then please do follow our webinar research. I'm forgetting the date of our next webinar. It's, I think, 18th May. Is that right? It's either 18th or 19th May.
Let me confirm. I think it's, let me just confirm that. Just a minute. We better share the right information.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, I should have had this.
No worries. While I look for it.
Yeah.
Okay, just a minute. So the next webinar will be on the 28th of May.
28th of May. Okay.
And it will be with Professor Nitya Rao of the University of East Anglia. And the title is From Cultivator to Footloose Labor, Renegotiating Land, Labor, and Gender Identities in Contemporary India. So you're all welcome to join us.
Okay. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining.
Thank you so much.
Everyone, bye-bye.
Thank you, Danielle. Thanks.